Private property. Well, in June of 2013, the Supreme Court ruled for private property rights. It was actually a big decision for private property rights because the court ruled that a Florida landowner, Mr. Koontz, he sued a local government agency for denying him a building permit and asking for a lot of money for that permit because he refused to pay for improvements on public property several miles away from his project. Well, it was a 5-4 decision that helped private property owners to claim that government requirements attached to land use permits actually amount to an improper taking. I think it's called inverse condemnation under the Constitution. In our Fifth Amendment, it says that private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. Well, this is a good ruling for our constitutional liberty, our private property rights across this great land, because it gives the landowner liberty to use his property from government overregulation and intervention. See, regulators in cities and towns and states, they should not hold people hostage by holding a permit there and asking and requiring demands for huge amounts of money or other concessions. Thank you, Justice Samuel Alito. He actually called it extortion. He said government agencies that will grant a permit only when they ask for huge concessions and money frustrates the Fifth Amendment, the right to just compensation, and are prohibited by court precedents. Well, right in Florida, the case of Koontz versus the St. John's Water Management District, the court said a government's demand for money could also constitute a taking of property. And the court said further that a landowner could make that argument even if nothing were taken because the permit was denied. And this exactly is what private property is all about. The Bible assumes and reinforces a system where private property belongs to individuals and their right to use it and develop it, not the government or to a society as a whole. We see this implied right in the 10 Commandments. Do you know the 8th commandment? You shall not steal. See, that assumes that human beings will own property that belongs to them individually, not to other people. So you don't steal your neighbor's property or his garbage can. I don't know that you'd want that, but their shovel, let's say. See, you're not to covet your neighbor's house. But we know the communists, the socialists, they can sum up their whole thinking, their whole theories of their way of life, communism and socialism, is one phrase: the abolition of private property. It's very dehumanizing when private property is abolished, because then the government controls all economic activity. And when the government controls all economic activity, it controls what you could buy, where you will live, even what job you'll have, what you'll get paid. Basically controls all of life. And that, my friends, is the beginning of the end for human liberty. It destroys people. It enslaves people. It destroys human liberty. So we're thankful that the Supreme Court ruled in favor, this time, of private property rights. Thank you, Mr. Coy Koontz Sr., for challenging the St. John's Water Management District in Florida and battling to protect your 15-acre property that you bought in 1972 in Orlando. And we appreciate very much what you have done to preserve and help individual property rights in this nation. We know that the St. John's Water Management District was demanding that you either reduce the size of your development or pay for improvements to their property, the St. John's Water Management District property several miles away. How ridiculous. They were holding a gun to your head. And thank you for fighting them. We realize they denied your permit. Mr. Koontz, may I share with you, I have property in Orlando too, and I'm in my 10th year to get permits to build a parking lot. And now the city of Orlando is demanding, after 10 years of regulations, and the St. John's Water Management District, the very one that you fought, is asking and demanding a $30,000 fee to get a building permit. Well, I can tell you, after hearing about your battle, there is no way I will pay that voluntarily. Thank you for winning this fight for private property again. We see what happens in many countries around the world when governments set up laws that prevent ordinary people like us from developing and owning private property. Peru is one of those countries where it takes hundreds and hundreds of steps, hundreds of government officials to get a single permit to build a little piece of development. It's ridiculous. People can never really own their own property or a business in this environment because it's just impossible to get a permit. And that's why today in the United States, the threat of private ownership of property is increasing at the highest level in government. The federal government, we know they have taken unprecedented steps to acquire controlling interests in our nation's banks, Citigroup and Bank of America. And remember, let's not forget how it forced Chrysler into accepting an agreement where a large share would be owned by Fiat, a controlling interest in a company that would be held by the UAW. It effectively acquired a controlling interest in General Motors as well. You remember the day when our president announced that he was firing the president of General Motors. That was unheard of in past American business, where a government could control property and fire the president of a company. Look how far we've come. Well, we all enjoy nice, clean air and clean water. Of course, we want a nice environment that's not harmful. But this is way beyond what government should be doing. Remember when President Clinton, he issued an executive order. He classified millions of acres of private property in the western part of the United States as protected land. It can never be bought, can never be sold again or developed. Under this executive order 13061, President Clinton designated 14 rivers as federal property. Under this executive order, the president designated 14 rivers, which actually became federal property, regardless of whether they ran through private property or not. And they did. So the property ended up being confiscated. Millions of additional acres of land being confiscated by Congress, effectively removed from the free market for private development. See, whenever the government takes over private companies and private property, personal liberty is lost. See, and the people that live and work on these lands, they become like servants of the government. They lose their liberty. And this is what's happening with the new healthcare law in the United States being rammed down the throats of businesses. Private doctors, nurses, hospitals, medical employees, supply companies will become effectively government employees. In effect, they will become servants, and a huge amount of human liberty will be lost. Private enterprises being forced to buy the insurance, the employer mandate. Individuals are being forced to buy health insurance through the government. You think this is right or this will help economic development? I guarantee you it will not. It will cause more unemployment. It's simple. Higher taxes, more regulations do not work. Well, at the Story of Liberty, we believe here that the government should promote economic growth in our nation, not hurt it. This is one of the primary responsibilities of government. It's to act as God's servant to do good for the citizens of a nation. In other words, as the great U.S. Constitution says, promote the general welfare of a nation, not provide. There's a big difference. Well, to summarize this one, it's a good victory for private property rights for the Supreme Court decision. Let's remember that one of God's purposes for human beings is that we should be productive and produce things from the earth and enjoy them, and yes, give thanks to God for them. These material things are not in themselves bad things. They're not unspiritual, like the Madonna song, Material Girl. I don't even know what that was about. Maybe you could tell me. But these are gifts from God. That's what they are. Because everything created by God is good. And frankly, we know it. God has created us with a strong desire to be creative, to be productive, produce things from the earth. You could do that in your garden and cooking. You could be an auto mechanic. You could be a carpenter or a pool manufacturer, so families could swim in a beautiful pool. These are all good things that the society will benefit from. So it is right. It is morally right for a government to seek and increase economic productivity in a nation. And thank you, Supreme Court, for this decision. So the Supreme Court ruling does bolster private property rights in America. This is what we need here at this point in time. A Florida landowner chose to sue a local government for denying him a building permit because he refused to pay for improvements on public property several miles away. Good for you, Mr. Koontz. Thank you for your courage, and we appreciate you taking this all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States and getting a 5-4 decision that expands the ability of millions of property owners to claim that the government requirements attached to land use permits are arbitrary and an improper taking under the Constitution, under the Fifth Amendment of the United States.